Welcome back to Arabian Echoes. We're diving into another one of Anis Mansour's stories from Spirits and Souls for this deep dive. You might remember our last exploration into Nefertiti's daughter appeared in London. But today, we're taking a look at the Association of Silent Writers Until Death.
And what really intrigues me here is that we're looking at a translation you know. It's been carefully done to keep the real feel and soul of Mansour's Arabic. So we're not just diving into a spooky story, but also into the art of taking its essence and moving it between languages and cultures.
It's true. We're bringing you Anis Mansour in English, trying to hold on to the richness and complexity of his original Arabic. But let's get into the story itself. We're starting in 18th century Cambridge University, a place you might usually think of as a center for all those brainy societies and scholarly stuff.
Right, but like any point in history, there's always a darker side. This is also a time when people were really drawn to the supernatural, the occult. Imagine those secret societies, those ghost stories whispered by candlelight.
Okay, so picture this. Cambridge is alive with all kinds of student clubs. You've got your typical debating societies, but then you have these groups that are, well, a little more unusual.
Exactly, and that's where our silent writers until death really stand out. They're shrouded in mystery, even fear, unlike those light-hearted clubs. Just the name itself gives you this unsettling feeling like there's something more going on than just student fun.
And then there's the house connected to the society. Mansour describes it so vividly. A narrow door, shadowy stairs, this feeling of decay. It's almost like the building itself is a character, reflecting all the secrets and darkness around the association.
That's a really insightful point. The house itself really plays into one of the big themes, hidden truths and the fear of the unknown. Even King George II, who is oddly obsessed with narrow doors, refused to tear this house down, even with its spooky reputation. It's like the house was a symbol of fear itself.
It's giving me goosebumps. But before we get too scared, let's talk about someone who tried to make sense of this mystery. Sir Kelly Cush.
Professor Cush was a well-known scholar who went deep into the history of the house and the society. His book, Useful Myths, explores this idea that even if something isn't literally true, just believing in it can blur the line between reality and myth.
So he's saying we can make things real just by believing in them. That's a powerful idea.
Exactly. And Cush wasn't just talking about it. He actually spent a night in the house experiencing that creepy atmosphere firsthand. Now that's dedication to research.
You know, that brings up a thought. If Professor Cush, a scholar, was drawn to this story, what is it about Mansour's writing, even in translation, that pulls us in?
I think it's the way he mixes the normal with the extraordinary. He sets the story in a recognizable place, Cambridge, but then brings in these supernatural elements that make us wonder, what's real here?
Right, and the way he describes the silent writers until death makes them seem so ordinary and yet totally terrifying.
Yeah.
It was started in 1730 by a group of young guys who seemingly had no big purpose other than meeting up on All Souls Day.
Yeah, but there's this strange irony to their meetings. For a group that seemed to focus on just having a good time, they actually had some really deep and insightful discussions. We know this because they kept very detailed minutes of their meetings.
It's almost like putting their thoughts on paper transformed them. Like a different side of them came out, a side that was deep and a little bit scary.
Exactly. In one of their first meetings, they talk about why they exist at all. One member says, "We gathered, we sat, we spoke, because if we don't speak, we die. And it's clear we don't want to die."
Wow, that's deep. They're basically saying that connection through talking and writing is what keeps us alive in a way.
Precisely. It shows how much they want to leave their mark on the world, to fight against the silence of death. But, as we'll see, their attempts to cheat death take a dark turn. Their roles, like the one about staying a member even after you die, hint at something sinister.
And then there's that creepy rule about possibly renaming the society the Association of Silent Writers in Death. It's like they knew their group would go beyond life and death.
It's almost like they were tempting fate, inviting the supernatural into their world. And that's where things get really interesting, especially with what happens to their president, Dermot.
This is where the story takes a sharp turn into the unexplainable. Dermot's killed in a duel in Paris, but on that same day, he shows up at a meeting back in Cambridge.
That brings up some serious questions about reality. How could Dermot be in two places at once? Is this time travel? Or is there something else happening here, something we just don't understand about the physical world?
And the details about his appearance are even creepier. He actually talks about his own death during the meeting, saying, "I've become a dead member," and his signature in the meeting minutes is exactly the same as before he died.
It's like some part of him, his spirit or essence, was tied to the society, forced to keep his commitment even in death.
That's just chilling.
And this isn't just a one-time thing. Another member dies, and his signature before and after death is identical too. The remaining members face a terrifying truth. They've been meeting with dead men.
Okay, now it's gone from intriguing to totally terrifying. What did they do when they realized what was happening?
They tried to disband the society, promising never to meet again. But it seems like their pact with the silent writers until death wasn't so easily broken.
Yeah, it was as if the society itself had a life of its own. Like it was demanding that they keep going. They were stuck in this cycle they couldn't break. That's a scary thought. Trying to get free from something that goes beyond being alive makes you think about the power of those rituals, the things they wrote, the oaths they swore. Could that stuff have anchored them to this existence even after death?
It really gets to the heart of the story, doesn't it? What's so special about this particular society that makes it so strong, so lasting?
And what about the last guy left, Professor Blasis? What happened to him?
Blasis, well, he's a tragic figure. Caught between his fear and his duty to the society. He tries to destroy their meeting records, thinking that might stop it all, but something forces him to keep showing up at those gatherings.
It's like the society has a will of its own, this hunger that can't be satisfied even by death.
And the last thing written in the minutes is maybe the creepiest part. It says that all 7 members are now dead members. And the meeting ends with everything in the house being destroyed except for the meeting book itself.
So the book, the actual record of them, it's the only thing that survives. It's like proof of the power of their words, their agreement, even after death.
Imagine finding that book in the middle of that destroyed house. That would be so creepy. I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
It reminds me of those stories about cursed objects, things with darkness attached to them, a leftover feeling of the things they've seen.
And even though the house seems to have disappeared, people still say weird things happen on November 2nd, the anniversary of their meetings. It's like the society's presence is still there, even though we can't explain it.
Like an echo going through time. A reminder that some things can't be silenced, not even by death.
And remember, Professor Kush, the scholar who spent his life trying to understand these blurry lines between real and myth, well, he died on November 2nd, too.
Wow, that adds a whole other level to this mystery. It's like the story itself is warning us, showing us how dangerous it can be to dig too deep into secrets that should stay hidden.
And that brings us back to what we're focusing on today, the translation of Mansour's work. Do you think the translator was able to capture that feeling of unease, of creeping dread that's in the original Arabic?
Oh, definitely. You can feel the heaviness of the story, that sense of looking into a world we don't understand. The translator did an amazing job keeping those subtle things in Mansour's writing. That way he has of making normal things seem extraordinary and familiar things feel totally strange.
Right, and I think that's what makes this story and this translation so interesting. It's not just a ghost story or a supernatural tale. It's more like a deep thought about what's real, about the power of belief and the mysteries that are at the core of being human.
And speaking of mysteries, I keep thinking about that line from the early meeting. If we don't speak, we die. It's simple, but it means so much.
It speaks to that need we all have to connect, to express ourselves, to leave something of ourselves behind. But it also hints at the darker side of that need, the fear of being forgotten, of fading away into silence.
Makes you wonder if those silent writers were really trying to become immortal through their words, through their pact.
And maybe they did, in a way. Their story is still being told, passed down, even though they're physically gone.
Their silence, in a way, has become their loudest voice.
Now, before we go further into the philosophy and spiritual side of this story, I want to ask you, our listeners, a question. Imagine you're a member of this society, bound by its weird rules, knowing you'd have to keep participating even after death. What would you do?
Would you accept the silence, stick to your duty to the society, even as your world changes around you?
Or would you try to break free, risk the unknown consequences of going against a power that seems to go beyond the grave?
It's a chilling thought, right? It makes us face our own beliefs about life, death, and the mysteries we can't understand.
And I think it shows how good of a storyteller Mansour was, and how skilled the translator is, that a story written so long ago can still affect us so deeply today.
It's really interesting to think that a story like this, coming from Arabic literature, can speak to such universal themes.
I agree. The fear of death, the need to connect, the pull of the unknown, these are all things that people feel no matter their culture or when they lived. And I think that's what makes Anis Mansour's work so powerful. He taps into those deep human emotions and weaves them into stories that scare us and fascinate us at the same time.
One thing that really struck me about the association of silent writers until death is how it plays with what we think is real. What starts as a simple ghost story becomes something much deeper, something that makes us question the very idea of existence.
That's a great point, and this is where Mansour's connection to Islamic thought is really important. The concept of the ruh, the soul, is very different in Islam compared to the Western idea. The ruh is seen as separate, a spiritual essence that exists beyond the body.
So is it possible that these silent writers, through their dedication to the society and their belief in its strange rules, somehow access this deeper level of existence, allowing their ruh to continue even after their bodies died?
It's a fascinating thought, right? And it gives us a whole new way to look at the story. Maybe it's not just about ghosts and hauntings, but a glimpse into a place where the lines between life and death are blurred, where the soul can go beyond the limits of the physical world.
That makes you think about Professor Kush. Again, he devoted his life to studying those useful myths, the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of things. But in the end, he couldn't explain the silent writers. He died on November 2nd, the same date tied to the Society's meetings, his research unfinished.
It's like the story itself fought back against his attempts to understand it, to fit it neatly into his ideas about belief and reality. Maybe that's the lesson here. Some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved, to live in our imagination and make us question what we think is possible.
It's a humbling thought, right?
Yeah.
As much as we want knowledge and answers, there's some things we'll never fully grasp.
But that doesn't mean we should stop searching, stop asking questions in a way. The search for knowledge is more about the journey than the destination. It's about expanding our minds, challenging our beliefs, and embracing the beauty of what we don't know.
Well said, and I think that's the perfect place to wrap things up. This deep dive into the association of silent writers until death has been a journey into Anis Mansour's world, a world where the normal and the extraordinary crash together, where reality and myth get tangled up, and where the echoes of the past still speak to us today. And remember, this particular story, it came to us through Arabian Echoes, a blog focused on Arabic literature.
Right.
That cross-cultural connection, well, it just adds another layer of intrigue. It shows how these universal themes, they just transcend geography and culture. The search for meaning, the contemplation of life and death, these are questions pondered by people throughout history and across cultures.
It really makes you wonder if there's some kind of deeper, more interconnected reality at play, something we're only glimpsing through stories like this.
Maybe. And perhaps that's the useful part of these myths. They challenge our assumptions,
Yeah.
They make us question what we think we know and open us up to the possibility of something more.
So if we entertain that possibility, that there's more to reality than we can see, what does this story tell us about legacy, about the marks we leave behind?
Well, the silent writers, even in their unconventional existence, they were clearly driven by this desire to leave their mark, to contribute to the world. Their meticulous minutes, those philosophical discussions, it's all evidence of their longing for something that would outlast them, that would persist.
It's like they were saying, even if our voices are silenced, our ideas will live on.
Exactly, and it makes you think about your own legacy, What signatures are you leaving behind? What ideas, what creations will continue to resonate long after you're gone?
Maybe that's the ultimate message of this story, a reminder that we're all contributing to something bigger. A tapestry of ideas and experiences that extends beyond just our individual lives.
And that even in silence, our contributions can have a real impact. Think about the ripple effect of a single action, a single word, a single idea.
It's like tossing a pebble into a pond, The ripples spread outward and they touch everything in their path. And even after the pebble sinks to the bottom, those ripples, they keep moving.
They do. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of the silent writers, we'll leave you with this. What ripples will you create? What legacy will you leave behind? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
And a big thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this exploration. We hope this translation, which was so carefully done to keep the true feeling of Mansour's original Arabic, has given you a taste of how rich and deep Arabic literature can be.
If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to Arabian Echoes so you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have more stories to share, more worlds to discover, and more mysteries to unravel, all from the incredible world of Arabic storytelling. Until next time, keep searching, Keep asking questions and keep your ears open to the echoes of stories that travel across time and cultures.